So 5 years ago, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, I left work early to go to the doctor because I was waiting for the result of a biopsy exam on a suspicious lump on my left breast. And as someone who always prepares for the worst, I had already diagnosed myself. I was like, I totally have cancer. Just tell me, right? And thanks to Dr. Google, I had even planned my last 3 months in the world. It was going to be me going to my boss and tell him, quit my job and travel the world, right? That was my plan. So when the doctor finally called me into her office and she told me it's benign, my first reaction was, do I still get to quit my job? And it was that moment that I realized, oh my God, did I really want to have cancer? So I could have the ultimate permission from the universe that I could finally walk away from a job I hated so much and the life that felt like it wasn't mine. Have you ever felt like that? Like you were stuck in something so heavy that you wish for an outside force to push you toward a change. And for me, that outside force was cancer. So, what in the world was going on? Well, at that time, I was working as an option trading quant in finance. Fancy title, good salary, impressive to strangers, and boring as hell to myself. I felt suffocated. Every morning, dragging myself out of bed felt like pulling myself from ashes. It was terrible. So, how did I get here? I asked myself. Well, I grew up in a small town in Chongqing. My parents, they were good people, but they were firm believers in discipline, criticism, and taking life very seriously. Right? To them, a good life was very simple: study hard, never make any mistakes, right? And secure your future with a high paying, stable job, AKA finance or engineering, right? And if you have any emotions, please kindly suppress them until further notice. Sounds familiar? That was the plan I followed for a long time. But deep down, I knew that there was another side of me. You know, there was a side of me that loved talking, joking around, a side of me that would only come alive when I made people laugh. I remember one time in fourth grade, I stayed late after school. I was entertaining my friends. I was telling some silly stories, and all of a sudden, my mom showed up, and she scolded me in front of everyone. I don't even remember exactly what she said, but I do remember the feeling she gave to me: shame. Like what I was doing, something that felt so natural to me, was wrong. So later on in my life, I buried that fire and I did what I was supposed to do. I studied hard. I survived the almighty Gaokao, right? I mean, my soul was a little crushed, but I came out okay, technically, right? So I moved to Hong Kong for college and I picked a major that made sense to my parents, engineering, and I got the right job in finance. Interesting, right? I was basically living the exact life my parents had wished for me. And I thought to myself, this is it. I've made it. And I feel so miserable. Every day at work, I felt like I was a panda in a zoo. Well fed, technically alive, but definitely not in my natural habitat. And at that time, the only time I would feel a little free was on the weekends. I partied hard, really hard. Blackouts, wasted money, bad decisions, you name it, right? Because what was the point of all the suffering at work if I didn't get at least to sabotage my liver as well after work, right? So it was a vicious cycle. Workout, burnout, escape, and repeat, right? And then the breast cancer scare happened and it shook me. Because then I realized under the seemingly flamboyant lifestyle, I was already dying, not physically, but inside, right? I needed a change, I thought to myself. So I did something that was considered radical at that time. I went to therapy. And at first, every session was just me ranting about how much I hated my job and how I had no other options. Until one day, my therapist asked me, Kate, what do you actually enjoy doing? And I was like, I don't know. I guess I like talking. I like giving my friends advice. I like watching stand up comedy sometimes. But then I immediately dismissed myself. I said, but why does it matter? Right? Like, I can make money out of these hobbies, right? I mean, I have a great job right now, and I'm clearly having a lot of fun in it, right? So I should just focus on that and be happy, right? And she looked at me and she said, who told you that? And that question was the match that lit something inside of me. Because it suddenly occurred to me that a lot of the things that I believe about life weren't even mine. They were given to me, they were taught to me, they were conditioned into me. And with that awareness, the fire started growing again. And I decided to do something crazy. I signed up for an English comedy open mic. Let me be clear. After working in finance for a few years, I was not that funny at that moment, right? English was not my first language, right? And just like most of us, public speaking was literally one of my biggest fears in life. So on the day of the open mic, I was waiting backstage, meaning the bar. I was waiting for my turn, and my heart was pounding so fast, like a malfunctioning washing machine, right? And my hands were so sweaty. And I kept thinking to myself, why am I doing this? I got a real job to go to tomorrow. And then I told myself, okay, Kate, just get this over with. Do this one time, survive, and pretend that it never happened, right? And then they called my name. I walked up to the stage, I grabbed the mic, and I started talking. And let me tell you, for the first minute of my set, nobody laughed. Nothing. No one. My stomach dropped. I panicked so much. Because you see, as a good Chinese kid, this had just become my worst nightmare, which is showing up to an exam that I did not prepare enough for. It was so bad. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, just finish this fast and never come back again, right? And then finally, I hit a punchline and someone chuckled in the back. And then another person. And then the whole room. And the first big laugh, it was like throwing gasoline on a dying flame. And it felt like to me, honestly, it felt like to me like I was being electrocuted in a good way, in a good way. I'm not even exaggerating, but it felt like a piece of my soul that died during Gaokao had just come back to life. And for the first time in years, I felt so alive. And then something even crazier happened. I kept going back, open mic after open mic. And the more I did it, the more my life outside of comedy also changed. You see, before I would show up to work drained, robotic, lifeless, like I was just clocking in for a prison sentence that gave me good benefits, right? And every morning I would drag myself out of bed, stare at my reflection, and think, is this really my life? And emails felt like a slow, painful death. Meetings felt like group therapy. And no one was healing, right? And the office air was just so stale. The fluorescent lights were so harsh, and I was just there. a body in a chair waiting for 6 p.m. to set me free. But then after I started doing stand up, I started showing up a little differently. Because now I wasn't just the quiet quant in finance again, right? I was the quiet quant with the secret. I had a life outside work, right? And miraculously, I started speaking up in meetings. I stopped shrinking in my cubicle, and I even started setting boundaries. And eventually, I walked away. I left the finance world behind myself, and I started building a career that's actually making sense to me, right? Comedy, coaching, helping others find their own fire. For all of you who are here today, when you walked into this room, I'm sure you received the question, if you found out you were to die tomorrow, what are the things that you would do today? And I want you all to sit with that question, because for a long time, I was living as if I was already dead inside. And I know I'm not the only one. So many of us were taught to tame our flame, to play safe, to stick to the plan. But I just want to say, our fire isn't meant to be contained. Our fire is meant to burn, to transform, and to ignite something new. So let me ask you, when was the last time that you did something that truly made you feel alive? What's the thing that excites you, but also terrifies you? What's the thing that you would do today if you weren't afraid? Whatever that thing is, please don't wait for a crisis like cancer to wake you up. Find it, feed it, and let it burn. Because life is too short to live without fire. Thank you.